Some men chase intelligence by talking more, arguing louder, or sounding clever. But the smartest men do the opposite. They speak less, but with purpose. They don't need to prove anything. Their silence carries more weight than most people's speeches. This video reveals 10 things an intelligent man never says, not because he's trying to sound perfect, but because he refuses to speak from ego, fear, or weakness. These common phrases may seem harmless, but they quietly sabotage your clarity, credibility, and power. Inspired by Stoic philosophy, this isn't about sounding wise. It's about living wisely. It's about cutting out the language of blame, excuses, and emotional noise, and replacing it with focus, strength, and calm authority. If you're ready to stop explaining, start thinking sharper, and speak like a man who doesn't need approval, then this video is for you. Like and subscribe now for more truth, less noise.
Number 1.
And I already know that. There's a quiet arrogance hidden in this sentence. On the surface, it sounds confident, decisive even, but beneath it lies a fragile ego that confuses information with wisdom. The moment a man says, "I already know that," he stops learning, and as the Stoics understood, the moment learning ends, decay begins. Epictetus warned clearly, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." This isn't just a clever saying, it's a diagnostic tool for the mind. When we assume we've mastered a lesson, we stop observing, we lose curiosity, we fall asleep in the illusion of certainty, and that's where suffering hides, beneath the pride of thinking we've arrived. An intelligent man doesn't protect his ego from being challenged. He protects his future from being limited. Instead of closing the door with, "I already know that," he opens it wider. He leans in, listens again, and lets old truths strike him in new ways. Why? Because he understands that wisdom isn't about collecting ideas, it's about living them again and again until they become bone deep. Even the great Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and philosopher king, never pretended to already know. In his Meditations, a private journal not written for applause, he repeated the same Stoic principles day after day. Don't be controlled by anger. Don't chase praise. Focus only on what you can control. These weren't reminders because he was forgetful. They were rituals of clarity. He knew that just because you've heard something before doesn't mean you've mastered it. The wise man isn't afraid of repetition, he respects it. By contrast, modern minds often treat wisdom like entertainment. They scroll past it, they swipe away the hard truths with a lazy, yeah, I know. But knowing is not doing, and true intelligence is revealed not in how much you've heard, but in how deeply you've absorbed. The Stoics taught that humility is the beginning of learning, not because it makes you sound noble, but because it keeps your mind open and your pride in check. When you say, "I already know that," you're not just rejecting a lesson. You're assuming you've outgrown the need for it. That assumption is dangerous. Here's the shift. Instead of reacting with dismissal, the intelligent man responds with reflection. When he hears something he's heard before, he doesn't roll his eyes. He asks himself, "Am I truly living this, or have I just memorized it?" That pause is where wisdom enters. And yes, sometimes the lesson is repeated in the same words. But the man who has changed hears it differently. The meaning evolves as he evolves. A sentence you read at 20 may hit harder at 40. A truth you ignored last year might save your peace today. This is why the intelligent man treats every moment as an opportunity to refine. Not to perform, he doesn't need to prove he's already wise. He just lives in the posture of a student. Always curious, always sharpening, always aware that what you think you know is the most dangerous blind spot of all. So remember, intelligence isn't about knowing more. It's about resisting the temptation to stop learning. The man who says, "I already know that," may win the moment, But the man who says nothing listens deeply and grows in silence. He wins the future.
Number 2.
That's just how I am. This phrase might sound like honesty, but it's really a cage when someone says, "That's just how I am." What they're often doing is locking themselves inside a fixed identity. They're declaring that who they are now is all they'll ever be. And in doing so, they surrender the most powerful truth available to any human being: the ability to change. Stoicism teaches that our nature is not rigid. It's responsive, as Epictetus put it. You are not your body, you are not your possessions, and you are not even your emotions. You are your choices. And that means no matter how deeply a behavior is rooted, no matter how long a pattern has existed, you still have the power to interrupt it, to rewire it, to rebuild who you are, choice by choice, moment by moment. Yet the man who says, "That's just how I am," believes he's being real, but what he's really doing is rejecting responsibility for his future. He's using identity as an excuse. Instead of confronting his temper, his laziness, his jealousy, or his indecision, he baptizes them, he gives them permanence. And once you declare a flaw as your identity, you no longer feel the need to correct it. You've made peace with a prison cell. Contrast that with someone like Socrates. He wasn't born disciplined, wise, or composed. In fact, the records show he was often misunderstood, mocked, and even infuriating to those around him. But what made him different wasn't some unchangeable nature. It was his relentless practice of questioning himself. Every conversation was a mirror, every mistake an invitation, and instead of defending who he was, he stayed curious about who he could become. This is the true mark of an intelligent man. He does not hide behind self-description. He rewrites it, not with fantasy, but with disciplined action, because he knows the past is not a prophecy. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken. Now let's be clear. Acknowledging your tendencies is useful. It shows self-awareness. But using them as shields against growth is cowardice in disguise. Saying, "I've always been like this," might explain your past, but it should never define your future. Growth begins when you stop defending who you've been and start building who you want to be. And it's not about changing everything overnight. Stoicism never promises transformation through force. It's about daily refinement, as Seneca wrote. No man becomes wise by chance. Progress is deliberate. It's in the pause before a reaction, in the breath before you speak, in the small decision to respond with intention, not impulse. So next time you hear yourself saying, "That's just how I am," pause. Ask instead, "Is this who I truly want to remain?" Because that question cracks the shell. It opens the possibility, and in that space, a different life begins. The intelligent man doesn't protect his ego with final statements. He protects his future with humble flexibility. He is willing to be rewritten, not by others, but by truth.
Number 3.
I don't care. At first glance, this sentence sounds strong, indifferent, free, but often it's none of those things. When a man says, "I don't care," what he's really saying is, "I'm afraid of being affected." It's not strength. It's a mask, a shield worn by someone who hasn't yet learned to face emotion with maturity. And Stoicism teaches us, indifference isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. Let's be honest. Life will test you. People will misunderstand you. Opportunities will slip through your hands. And if you tell yourself, "I don't care," every time you feel rejected, ignored, or unseen, you're not becoming stronger. You're becoming numb. You're building a wall around your heart, not a fortress of wisdom. And what you call not caring is often just unresolved pain turned inward, camouflaged as stoicism. Epictetus made it clear. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And the man who repeats, "I don't care," is often trying to silence the discomfort instead of transforming it. But true intelligence doesn't run from feelings. It observes them, learns from them, and then decides how to respond, not react. The Stoic doesn't deny pain. He transforms it into clarity. Now consider someone like Leonardo da Vinci, a man of deep feeling and deep focus. He didn't shut himself off from curiosity, from criticism, or from uncertainty. He cared, but with direction. He didn't care about fame. He didn't care about being understood in his own time. What he cared about was truth, excellence, and self-mastery. And because of that, he became immortal in a way applause never could. The intelligent man doesn't say, "I don't care," to avoid pain. He says, "I care," selectively, intentionally. He knows that caring is not weakness. It's power with precision. He chooses where to place his attention. He knows that what you feed with energy grows. And so he doesn't feed outrage, gossip, or shallow validation. He feeds purpose. He protects peace. He cares, but on his own terms, by his own code. Stoicism is often misunderstood as cold or emotionless. But Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, spoke often of grief, duty, love, and disappointment. He didn't erase these emotions. He examined them. He treated each feeling as data, as weather passing through the mind. And that's the key, not denial, not escape, but discipline. The intelligent man allows himself to feel, but he refuses to be hijacked. So the next time you're tempted to say, "I don't care," stop. Ask yourself, is this truly beneath me? Or am I afraid to be seen trying? Because most of the time, "I don't care" is not a statement of strength. It's a disguise for wounded pride. And that's not intelligence. That's retreat dressed in armor. The wise man doesn't shut down emotion. He refines it. He lets it pass through the fire of reason. He learns what to keep, what to discard, and what to turn into fuel. That's the quiet power the world cannot take away. Not coldness, but controlled fire. Not apathy, but intentional care.
Number 4.
I'll try. At first it sounds harmless, even optimistic. I'll try gives the impression of effort, of willingness. But look closer. I'll try isn't a commitment. It's a hesitation wrapped in hope. It's a soft promise, designed to protect the speaker from the pain of failure by never fully stepping into the risk of success. And the Stoics knew, where there is no commitment, there is no power. When a man says, "I'll try," what he often means is, "I want the result, but I'm not ready to confront the cost." It's a verbal escape hatch, a backdoor. If he fails, he can say, "Well, at least I tried." If he succeeds, he acts surprised, but either way, he avoids accountability. That's not virtue, that's avoidance dressed in good intentions. The Stoic path demands something sharper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." In other words, don't try be, don't negotiate with your own potential. Step fully into it, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. Because that discomfort is not an obstacle. It's the training ground of character. Every act of discipline, every moment of decisiveness, builds the internal muscle that separates the wise from the weak. Consider the example of Benjamin Franklin. He didn't try to become disciplined. He built a daily practice around it. He didn't try to become wise. He tracked his moral progress, reflected deeply, and took specific action when he failed. He lived in motion, not in maybe. He wrote down his faults, admitted them, then built systems to overcome them. And that's what made him a man of substance, not speculation. Of course, "I'll try" may sound noble in moments of uncertainty. It feels gentle, safe, but real growth isn't safe. It requires precision. You either commit or you don't. You either do the work or you talk about doing the work. And that's the difference between the man who evolves and the man who stays circling the same struggles year after year. Now, this doesn't mean you'll succeed every time. Stoicism doesn't promise results, it promises alignment. You're not judged by whether you win, but by whether you showed up with full effort, full presence, and full responsibility. And that starts by replacing "I'll try" with a decision. I will or I won't. Clarity over comfort, action over ambiguity. And when you fail, as we all do, you don't need to hide behind soft words. You face it with strength. You say, "I gave everything I had and now I begin again." That's stoic. That's power. That's how an intelligent man moves. Deliberate, honest, and unafraid of falling. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I'll try," pause, ask instead, am I prepared to fully show up for this or not? Because life doesn't respond to hesitation, it responds to intention. And intention only becomes real when it's backed by action. The intelligent man doesn't try to be disciplined. He trains. He doesn't try to be wise. He reflects, refines, and repeats. He doesn't try to live with purpose. He builds it one deliberate choice at a time. And he doesn't need to say, "I'll try," because his life already speaks for him.
Number 5.
It's not my fault. Few sentences drain your power faster than this one. "It's not my fault" might be factually true, but that's not the point. The Stoics weren't interested in blame. They were interested in response, in what you can do next. Because when you fixate on fault, you give away the one thing you actually control, your ability to act with intention. Let's break this down. When a man says, "It's not my fault," he's usually trying to protect his image. He wants the world to know, "I'm innocent," but innocence doesn't move your life forward. Ownership does, responsibility does. The Stoics taught that your power begins where excuses end. Even if you didn't cause the problem, you are still responsible for your next step within it. The question isn't, "Whose fault is this?" The real question is, "What will I do now?" Epictetus didn't say control everything. He said focus only on what you can control, and that includes your mindset, your habits, your attitude, your words, and your response. Blame is a distraction. It might feel justified, even righteous, but it keeps you stuck in the past. It leaves you waiting for someone else to fix things before you can move forward. That's not freedom. That's dependence in disguise. Now consider someone like Thomas Edison. Throughout his career, he faced thousands of failed experiments, countless rejections, and even open ridicule. But he never wasted energy assigning blame. He didn't say, "It's the market's fault," or "That investor didn't believe in me." He simply adjusted, learned, kept moving. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's not just clever, it's stoic in spirit. He understood that assigning fault is irrelevant if you're still committed to the outcome. Blame may win sympathy, but it won't build anything. And intelligent men don't waste breath describing who hurt them, who misunderstood them, or who should have done better. They transmute that energy into clarity, into action, into purpose, because they understand. No one can steal your power unless you give it away by saying, "It's not my fault." Stoicism teaches you to zoom out. Life is a storm of unpredictable events, some fair, some brutal, but you always remain the gatekeeper of your internal response. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And that estimate is your responsibility to shape, not someone else's to fix." So when something goes wrong, yes, examine the cause, learn the pattern, protect yourself in the future, but don't anchor your identity in blame. Say instead, "This happened, now what?" That shift puts you back in motion. It moves you from victim to agent. And agency is where real intelligence lives. The man who constantly says, "It's not my fault," becomes predictable. He avoids feedback. He hides from discomfort. He waits for life to be fair, But the man who says, maybe it wasn't my fault, but it's still my responsibility to grow from this, that man becomes unstoppable. Not because he's perfect, but because he refuses to be passive. Number 6, it's too late. There's a quiet tragedy in this phrase. It's too late sounds like a fact. But most of the time, it's just fear in disguise. Fear of change, fear of failure, fear of starting small. And the Stoics would remind you, the only thing that's too late is the moment you refuse to begin. When someone says it's too late, what they often mean is, I'm too embarrassed to be seen starting over. They've convinced themselves that beginnings have an expiration date, that if something didn't happen by 25 or 35 or 50, it's no longer worth doing. But this mindset isn't about time, it's about ego. And ego is a liar. Seneca wrote, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's a prescription. Life doesn't care how old you are. The logos, the natural order of things, doesn't operate on your timeline. Growth remains available to you until your final breath, but only if you choose it. Only if you silence the voice that says, it's too late, and replace it with, it starts now. Look at someone like Laura Ingalls Wilder. She published her first book, Little House in the Big Woods, at the age of 65. Before that, she had no fame, no recognition, and no platform. But she didn't let age dictate her direction. She began. And because she began, millions were moved. She could have said, it's too late. Instead, she asked, why not now? This is what intelligent men understand. Time is not your enemy, regret is. And the best antidote to regret is present action. Even if you start late, even if it's imperfect, you reclaim your power by refusing to quit on your own life. The Stoics didn't believe in destiny as something handed to you. They believed in shaping your character through decisions, no matter when those decisions begin. And yes, starting late has its challenges, but so does never starting. So does waking up 10 years from now with the same frustration, the same longing, the same excuses. The man who says it's too late guarantees the outcome he fears most, stagnation. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, you could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think. That's not morbid, it's liberating, because once you realize how little time is promised, you stop negotiating with delay. You stop worshiping the perfect moment and start using the moment you're in. So the next time you hear yourself whispering, it's too late, ask, too late for what? To be better? To think clearer? To act with more courage? Because as long as breath is in your body, nothing essential is too late. Not for growth, not for peace, not for purpose. The intelligent man doesn't measure his life by clocks and calendars. He measures it by how fully he's living now. He knows that wisdom doesn't come early or late. It comes when you're ready to receive it. And he never lets the illusion of too late rob him of what could still be. Number 7, I need everyone to understand me. This sentence sounds innocent, natural even, but beneath it lies a quiet desperation. The craving to be understood by everyone is not a sign of emotional maturity. It's a sign of misplaced identity, because when your peace depends on universal understanding, you're no longer grounded in truth. You're floating in the shifting winds of other people's perception. Wanting to be understood is human, but needing it, that's a trap. It leads to over-explaining, overthinking, and over-apologizing. You begin performing instead of living. You shrink your edges, you smooth your voice, and slowly, quietly, you lose sight of who you are beneath the performance. As the Stoics would warn, this is not virtue. This is slavery to opinion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. In other words, the more you crave understanding from others, the more you abandon your inner compass. That compass, your judgment, your intention, your principle, is the only reliable guide in a world full of noise and projection. Now consider someone like Ludwig van Beethoven. He ended his life completely deaf, creating music no one thought possible, writing compositions he could no longer hear. People doubted him. Some mocked him. Most didn't understand him. But he didn't stop to beg for validation. He didn't pause his vision to gather applause. He kept creating, not because he felt seen, but because he had something true to give, something that didn't require permission. This is the shift intelligent men make. They stop asking, "Do they get me?" and start asking, "Am I living with integrity?" Because the first question leads to confusion, the second leads to strength. Understanding from others is nice, but it is never the foundation. It cannot be. Because clarity with yourself must come first, or nothing else holds. And yes, misunderstanding hurts, especially when it comes from those closest to you. But that pain can either make you smaller, or it can make you clearer. The Stoic path chooses clarity. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because the early stages of growth often look strange, especially to those who've chosen comfort over courage. And here's the truth. The more clearly you live, the more misunderstood you may become. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stopped playing by familiar rules, you've stopped performing. And to the untrained eye, silence looks like arrogance. Confidence looks like coldness. But the wise man keeps walking. So the next time you find yourself spiraling into the need to explain, to justify, to fix how someone sees you, pause, ask instead, "Am I being true to myself?" Because that's the only alignment that matters. People's opinions will shift, stories will distort, but your principles, that's where real stability lives. The intelligent man doesn't perform his truth. He lives it, and when misunderstanding comes, he lets it pass. He doesn't panic. He doesn't chase. He knows that silence can say more than arguments ever could. And he would rather be quietly misunderstood than loudly inauthentic, always. Number 8, if only I had more time. This phrase feels justified, relatable, but if you look closely, it's one of the most seductive lies we tell ourselves. If only I had more time sounds like a scheduling problem. But more often than not, it's a clarity problem. It's not that we don't have time, it's that we're unsure of what truly matters. The Stoics didn't measure life in hours. They measured it in use. Seneca, in his essay on the shortness of life, said bluntly, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This wasn't a metaphor, it was a warning. People don't realize how much time they lose to indecision, to distraction, to reacting instead of acting. They scroll, they multitask, they complain, and then say there's not enough time. But the truth is, they're not short on time, they're short on direction. When someone says, "If only I had more time," what they're often avoiding is the discomfort of prioritization. They don't want to confront what they'd actually do if time weren't the excuse. Because the moment you remove that excuse, you must face something deeper: discipline, intention, courage. Saying "I don't have time" gives you cover. Saying "I won't choose" demands honesty. Now consider someone like Viktor Frankl. While imprisoned in a concentration camp, stripped of everything, his family, his work, his physical freedom, he still found the time and mental clarity to create the foundation of his life's philosophy. He went on to write Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most impactful psychological texts of the 20th century. He didn't have more time, he had more purpose. That was his anchor. That was his clarity. That's the Stoic way. Time is not about volume, it's about focus. The intelligent man doesn't wait for free time to appear. He makes time for what aligns with his values. He doesn't say, if only, he asks, what now? Because the only moment that exists is this one. And the only thing that shapes your life is what you choose to do with it. Of course, there will be seasons of constraint. There are bills, jobs, family, obligations. But the Stoic doesn't complain about what he can't change. He simplifies. He eliminates noise. He protects his energy. He knows that a few minutes of focused attention are worth more than hours of scattered distraction. And so, he treats time like sacred currency. Something to be invested, not spent. The man who keeps saying, if only I had more time, will always be at the mercy of his circumstances. But the man who takes responsibility for his attention, who acts even in small windows of stillness, builds a life of momentum. One disciplined hour a day, practiced over a year, can rebuild an entire identity. So the next time you hear yourself say, if only I had more time, pause. Ask instead, what am I making time for right now? Because your schedule reveals your values far more than your words ever will. The intelligent man doesn't hope for more time. He honors the time he has, fully, fiercely, without excuse. Number 9. That's unfair. This phrase sounds innocent, reasonable, even righteous. But from a Stoic perspective, it's also a distraction, because when you focus on fairness, you shift your energy outward, toward things you can't control. That's unfair becomes a way of arguing with reality. And as the Stoics knew, arguing with reality doesn't change it. It just drains you. Let's be clear. Life is unfair. That's not cynicism. That's clarity. People will betray you. Opportunities will pass you by. Hard work will go unnoticed, and someone with less integrity might be rewarded more than you. But if your peace depends on fairness, you've already lost. You've handed over your emotional stability to a world that was never designed to keep things balanced. Epictetus said, it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them. And the judgment of, this isn't fair, often keeps a man stuck in bitterness, stuck in comparison, stuck in a loop where he demands justice before he takes the next step. But the Stoic doesn't wait for life to be fair. He just makes the next move anyway. He understands that resentment is not strength. It's delay dressed as virtue. Now look at someone like James Baldwin, a Black writer and intellectual in mid-20th century America. He lived in a society that denied him opportunity, respect, and safety simply because of who he was. He had every reason to scream, "That's unfair." And he didn't pretend otherwise, but he didn't let that phrase define his power. He didn't wait for the world to hand him permission. He wrote, he spoke, he challenged. And in doing so, he transcended the structures that tried to diminish him. That's Stoicism, not silence, but sovereignty, not compliance, but creative defiance grounded in principle. You see, when you fixate on unfairness, your energy gets stuck in resentment. You start measuring your worth against outcomes instead of actions. And once you do that, you begin to withhold your effort, waiting for things to get better before you show up fully. That's how talent dies. That's how potential gets buried under emotion. The intelligent man accepts that life isn't fair, but he doesn't use that as a reason to withdraw. He uses it as a reason to sharpen, to adapt, to create regardless. Fairness isn't the goal. Strength is, because when you're strong, you stop waiting for justice to move forward. You create your own momentum. You respond with discipline instead of drama. You rise with intention instead of sulking in frustration. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That means your job isn't to make life fair. It's to make yourself prepared to face rejection without collapse, prepared to endure setbacks without bitterness, prepared to keep building even when the world feels indifferent. So the next time you hear yourself thinking, "That's unfair," pause, acknowledge the pain, but don't camp there. Ask instead, what does this moment require of me now? Because that question returns your power. It anchors you in action. And action, not fairness, is what transforms you. The intelligent man doesn't wait for the world to treat him fairly. He meets the world with quiet strength and moves anyway. Number 10. What will they think of me? This question haunts more lives than failure ever could. It's subtle, it sounds responsible, but underneath, it's a cage. What will they think of me is the voice of a man living in exile from himself, and the Stoics knew, the more you live in the minds of others, the less you truly live. It starts quietly. You hesitate before saying something honest. You edit your truth to sound more acceptable. You show up not as you are, but as who you hope they'll approve of, and slowly, piece by piece, you become a reflection, not a person, a walking compromise, a diluted version of yourself that still doesn't guarantee belonging. Epictetus warned of this directly. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In other words, the path to peace is not paved with applause, it's paved with courage. The courage to be misunderstood, to be doubted, even to be disliked, for the right reasons. Because the moment you start chasing everyone's approval, you abandon your own judgment, and no man can live with dignity while outsourcing his conscience. Now consider someone like Ralph Waldo Emerson. His essays were ridiculed by the religious leaders of his time. He was called arrogant, reckless, dangerous. But Emerson refused to conform. He once wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." He didn't wait for the world to agree. He spoke, he lived, he followed his inner signal. And that became his legacy. That's the mark of an intelligent man. The courage to trust his own mind, even when the crowd recoils. You see, the man who constantly wonders, "What will they think of me?" is not living. He's performing. And performance, no matter how polished, always leads to exhaustion. Why? Because it's never enough. You gain one person's approval, you lose another's. You say the right thing in one room, only to be criticized in the next. But when you anchor yourself in values, not reactions, you stop bending with every opinion. You become still, and in that stillness, your clarity returns. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, be indifferent to what makes no difference, and most people's fleeting opinions, they make no real difference. They shift like wind, they fade like echoes. But your character, that's what endures. That's what you live with when the noise fades and you're left with yourself. Your peace isn't found in their praise, it's found in your alignment. So the next time that question creeps in, what will they think of me? Pause and ask instead, what will I think of myself if I betray what I know is true? That's the real question. That's the one that will shape your peace, or poison it. Approval is temporary, integrity is forever. The intelligent man doesn't fear being misunderstood. He fears being untrue to himself. And while the world may misread him, twist him, dismiss him, he remains unmoved. Not because he's arrogant, but because he's anchored. And that kind of man doesn't need to be understood. He needs to be real. If you made it this far, understand this. Intelligence isn't about sounding smart. It's about living wisely. It's not found in fancy words or quick comebacks, but in what you refuse to say, in your restraint, in your silence, in your refusal to defend ego or chase approval. The Stoic man doesn't speak to impress. He speaks to align with truth, or not at all. So take these 10 phrases, burn them from your vocabulary, and replace them with presence, purpose, and quiet confidence. If this message resonated with you, like the video, subscribe for more Stoic fire, and share it with someone who needs this clarity. Because real intelligence isn't loud, it doesn't explain, it just moves with intention. And that is what separates a man from the noise.